It all started with a strange notification. Mark, a tech-obsessed college student, was scrolling through his phone when he noticed an unfamiliar icon. The app was called Wish You. At first he thought it was just spam, but something compelled him to open it. When he launched the app, the screen displayed a simple message. Make a wish. Anything you desire, no limits. But remember, every wish comes with a cost. Mark thought it was a joke and sarcastically typed, I wish my math homework that's killing me would disappear. Moments later, he received an email from his professor saying class had been cancelled due to an emergency. Confused, Mark dismissed it as a coincidence, but curiosity got the better of him. That night, he opened the app again. He started making smaller wishes, finding money, winning a match in his favorite game, or even having the rain stop. Each wish came true with eerie precision. However, strange anomalies began to occur. One of his favorite plants suddenly withered, his headphones stopped working for no reason, and his dreams were filled with bizarre images and dark figures that seemed to watch him.
One day, driven by ambition, Mark made a bigger wish, to pass an important exam without studying. The next day, the results showed a perfect score. But then, he heard unsettling news. One of the top students in his class had suffered a mysterious accident and couldn't attend the exam. Mark started to suspect the app was connected to these events. He decided to test his theory with a darker wish. I want Sarah, my ex, to talk to me again. Hours later, he received a message from her, but her text was strange. I can't stop thinking about you, but it feels like something is forcing me. It was as if she were trapped by an inexplicable force. Mark tried deleting the app, but every time he restarted his phone, Wish You reappeared. He felt watched. Shadows in his room seemed to move, and whispering voices filled the silence. In a desperate attempt, he wished for everything to go back to normal, but nothing happened. Instead, the app displayed a new message for the first time. You broke the rules. Prepare to pay the price. That night, Mark vanished. His phone was found on his bed, open to the app. The screen flickered with a final message. Next user, welcome, make your wish.
Alex, an avid gamer, spent countless hours exploring game servers, always searching for something new and exciting. One night, while scrolling through forums, he received a private message from an unknown user. The message read, Join the Omega server. It's not for everyone, but if you're brave, you'll enjoy it. Intrigued and a little skeptical, Alex copied the server address and logged in. The server loaded quickly, but it was unlike anything he had seen before. There were no menus, no player lists, and no traditional maps, just a vast, shadowy expanse that stretched endlessly. A glowing note hovered in the air at the start point. Only the chosen will uncover the truth. As Alex began to explore, a sense of unease settled over him. The graphics were hyper-realistic, but something felt off. Shadows seemed to move independently, flickering unnaturally across the terrain. The NPCs were even stranger. They didn't follow typical program patterns. Instead, they stared directly at Alex, their heads turning to watch him as he passed. When he tried to interact with them, they didn't speak in the usual game languages. At first, their words were incomprehensible, but soon they began to sound familiar, too familiar. One of the NPCs finally spoke clearly. Alex, why are you here? We know what you've done. The deeper Alex ventured into the server, the more unsettling it became. He stumbled upon structures that mirrored places from his own life, a park he visited as a child, his old school, and finally, his house. Every detail was eerily accurate, from the peeling paint on the walls to the crack in his bedroom window. Then, in a shadowy corner of the map, he discovered something even more disturbing, a digital version of himself. The figure stood motionless at first, but its eyes were open, and they seemed to follow Alex as he approached. When Alex got closer, the avatar began to move, mimicking his real-life gestures with a slight delay. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. Panicking, Alex tried to log out, but the usual options were gone. Pressing escape or trying keyboard commands did nothing. Suddenly, a message appeared on the screen. You can't leave until you fulfill your purpose. Alex's heartbeat raced as he tried every trick he knew to shut down the game, but nothing worked. The server seemed to have taken control of his entire system. Then another message appeared. Go deeper if you want answers. With no other choice, Alex ventured further into the game. The environment grew darker, and the unsettling feeling of being watched intensified. He heard faint whispers, as if the game itself was speaking to him, but the words were fragmented and unintelligible. The terrain became twisted, with impossible angles and floating objects like a corrupted version of reality. Eventually, Alex reached a massive door, its surface pulsating with a strange organic texture. Above it was inscribed, "Face yourself to escape." Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped through. Inside, he found himself in a perfect replica of his real-life bedroom, but everything felt wrong. The air was heavy, and the shadows moved unnaturally. His digital double was there, sitting on the bed, grinning eerily. "You thought this was just a game," it said in Alex's own voice. "But this is your reckoning." Alex froze, unable to process what he was seeing. The digital double stood and began to circle him, its movements unnervingly smooth, almost too perfect. "You've ignored the consequences of your actions for far too long," it said, its grin widening. "Now it's time to pay." Memories began flashing on the walls around him. Moments from his life that he thought were buried. Arguments with friends. Lies he had told. And mistakes he had made. The digital double pointed at the images. "You thought no one was watching, didn't you? But we see everything." Panicked, Alex shouted, "What do you want from me?" The double's smile vanished. "We want you to understand. Every choice you make leaves a mark. And now you're trapped by your own shadow." Suddenly the game glitched, and Alex found himself back at the server's starting point. Only this time there was no way forward, just a black void stretching endlessly. His reflection appeared on the screen, staring back at him with hollow eyes. A final message popped up. "Welcome to the Omega server. You're part of the system now." Alex's computer shut down abruptly. When he tried to restart it, the screen only displayed the server's name, Omega. His keyboard and mouse were unresponsive. From that day forward, Alex was never seen again. But somewhere, deep within the dark corners of the internet, the Omega server remained, waiting for its next victim. In 1978, a small local TV station in a rural town decided to air an experimental late-night program. Advertised only as Midnight Special, the show was broadcast for one night only, at precisely 12 a.m. The station promised something revolutionary, a never-before-seen experience. Few people tuned in, given the odd timing and lack of marketing. Those who did described it as indescribable. The footage featured eerie static interspersed with surreal, disjointed scenes. A flickering light bulb, a woman standing motionless in a field, and muffled whispers that seemed to speak directly to the viewers. Some claimed they could hear their names being spoken, though the audio was garbled. The next morning, the town was abuzz with rumors. A local farmer was found wandering miles from his home, unable to remember how he got there. A teenager who had been watching the broadcast alone was found catatonic in his living room. By the end of the week, 3 people had gone missing without a trace. The station denied airing anything unusual, and the tape was reportedly destroyed. Years passed, and the strange broadcast faded into urban legend. That is, until now. Decades later, in 2023, Emily Carter, a young journalist known for her investigative stories on urban legends, stumbled upon a peculiar thread on an old online forum. It was titled, "The Midnight Broadcast, Lost Tape Found." The post claimed that a VHS copy of the infamous 1978 broadcast had surfaced at a flea market in a nearby city. Emily's curiosity was piqued. She had grown up hearing whispers of the broadcast, but like most, she dismissed it as a fabricated tale. The post included a blurry photo of the VHS cover with the words "Midnight Special" scrawled in faded marker. The user who posted it, however, hadn't logged in since sharing their discovery. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily tracked the flea market and eventually found the vendor who had sold the tape. After some coaxing, the man admitted he had purchased a box of old tapes from an estate sale, but he didn't recall who had bought Midnight Special. He handed her a list of potential buyers, and one name stood out: Marcus Lang, a retired TV technician who had worked at the station in 1978. Emily visited Marcus's home, a rundown house on the outskirts of town. Marcus seemed hesitant to talk at first, but when she mentioned the broadcast, his demeanor shifted. "You don't want to dig into this," he said. his voice trembling. "That tape, it's cursed. People who watch it don't come back the same." Ignoring his warnings, Emily persuaded him to hand over the tape, promising she would handle it carefully. As she left, Marcus muttered under his breath, "If you hear the whispers, don't answer them." Back at her apartment, Emily sat staring at the VHS tape resting on her desk. Its worn exterior gave no indication of the horrors it might contain, but Marcus's warning echoed in her mind. Still, the journalist in her couldn't resist. She dusted off an old VCR she had picked up at a thrift store and slid the tape in. The screen flickered to life with static, followed by a low humming noise. The tape began with what appeared to be a simple title card, "Midnight Special," presented by WQRT Channel 6. But as the text faded, the broadcast quickly descended into chaos. The first scene was a shaky shot of a dimly lit room. The camera panned across a table covered in strange objects, a cracked mirror, an antique clock stuck at midnight, and a single burning candle. A shadow passed in front of the camera, but no person could be seen. Then, the whisper started. At first, Emily thought it was interference, but the voices grew louder, clearer. They were speaking her name. "Emily, we've been waiting." She felt a chill crawl down her spine. Her rational mind told her it was a coincidence. Someone else named Emily might have watched this tape decades ago. But the voices didn't stop. They began recounting details of her life, her childhood home, her first article, even the date her mother had died. The screen cut to black for several seconds, and when it returned, the scene had changed. It now showed a woman standing in a field, her back turned to the camera. Slowly, the woman turned, revealing a face that was disturbingly similar to Emily's own. The figure stared directly at the screen and mouthed the words, "Why are you watching?" Emily jolted back, hitting the stop button on the VCR. The screen went dark, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to echo in her apartment, growing louder and more frantic. She looked around, heart pounding, but she was alone. Or so she thought. Emily sat frozen, her mind racing. The whispers didn't fade. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She unplugged the TV, hoping to silence them, but the voices continued, weaving through her thoughts like a relentless storm. "Emily, why did you stop? You need to finish!" The whispers cooed, their tones shifting between menacing and pleading. Her phone buzzed on the desk, jolting her out of her paralysis. It was an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Emily," a distorted voice said on the other end, matching the whispers perfectly. "You've started something you can't undo. Play the tape." The call disconnected. She considered destroying the tape, burning it, smashing it, but a gnawing curiosity kept her from acting. What was on the rest of the broadcast? What secrets did it hold? As a journalist, she felt compelled to uncover the truth, even if it terrified her. Emily decided to play the tape again, but this time, she set up her camera to record it. She pressed play and the screen flickered back to life. The scene in the field reappeared, but now, the figure that looked like her was closer, staring directly into the camera. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, its voice distorted. The screen glitched and the broadcast shifted to a new scene, a dark corridor lit by a faint red glow. Heavy breathing echoed, accompanied by faint footsteps. Emily's heart pounded as the camera moved down the corridor. The whispers returned, louder this time. "She's watching, she's here, she'll never leave." Suddenly the screen cut to static, and the tape ejected itself from the VCR. The whispers stopped. Her camera, which had been recording, turned off. The memory card inside was empty. Emily stared at the tape in disbelief. Whatever was on it wasn't just a broadcast, it was alive. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The whispers were gone, but the oppressive silence felt worse. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the moonlight, seemed alive. The tape sat on her desk, taunting her with its presence. She knew she couldn't leave it there, but she couldn't bring herself to destroy it either. The next morning, she decided to dig deeper into the origins of the broadcast. She went back to Marcus Lang's house, determined to get more answers. When she arrived, the door was slightly ajar. She stepped inside, calling out his name, but there was no response. The house was in disarray, papers scattered everywhere. On the wall of his living room was a bulletin board covered in newspaper clippings, photographs, and notes. At the center of it all was a grainy black and white still from the broadcast, a shot of the woman in the field. Scribbled underneath in red ink were the words, "She's the key." As Emily examined the board, she heard a faint creak from upstairs. Against her better judgment, she climbed the staircase, her heart pounding with each step. She found Marcus in his bedroom, sitting in a chair facing the window. His body was limp, and his eyes stared blankly ahead. In his hand was a small portable TV, still playing the tape on a loop. On the screen, the figure in the field was now standing right in front of the camera, its face inches from the lens. It whispered, "Why didn't you listen?" The TV flickered, and the screen went dark. Emily backed away, horrified, and called the authorities. When they arrived, the TV and the tape were gone, as if they had never existed. Marcus's death was ruled a heart attack, but Emily knew better. She could still feel the weight of the broadcast's curse, and it was only growing stronger. Shaken but determined, Emily returned home with Marcus's cryptic notes. Among the scattered pages, she found references to the original creators of the broadcast, 3 individuals associated with WQRT Channel 6. 2 had mysteriously disappeared within months of the show airing, while the third, Eleanor Graves, had been institutionalized shortly after. Eleanor's address was listed in the files, leading Emily to a dilapidated psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of town. The building looked abandoned, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. Inside, the air was thick with decay, and the faint hum of flickering lights echoed down the hallways. Emily found Eleanor in a small room at the end of a corridor. She was frail, her hair white, though her eyes burned with intensity. Eleanor looked up as Emily entered, a knowing smile spreading across her face. "You watched it, didn't you?" she rasped. Emily nodded, holding back the wave of fear creeping over her. "What is it? What did you create?" she asked. Eleanor chuckled darkly. "We didn't create it. We found it. The broadcast. It wasn't ours. We were just the messengers." "What does that mean?" Emily pressed. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's a doorway. It lets them in. Every viewer opens the gate a little wider." Emily's stomach dropped. "Who are they?" Eleanor's smile faded. "You'll find out soon enough. They've already marked you." Before Emily could ask more, Eleanor began to convulse violently. Nurses rushed in, but it was too late. Eleanor let out a final strangled breath, her eyes fixed on Emily as she whispered one last word. "Run." Emily left the hospital, Eleanor's words haunting her. "It's a doorway." Desperate for answers, she pored over Marcus's notes, finding references to the origin point, the location of the original broadcast. The old WQRT Channel 6 station, long abandoned, was her next destination. She arrived at the decrepit building late that night. Inside, the air felt heavy, as if the walls were holding secrets. The control room was eerily intact with an old TV in the center. As Emily approached, the screen flickered to life, showing static. Her reflection appeared on the screen, but it didn't mimic her movements. Instead, it smiled, a grin that didn't belong to her. "You're too late," it said in a voice that wasn't hers. "They're already here." The static shifted, revealing dark figures moving closer. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "Open the gate. Let us through." Emily realized the tape wasn't just cursed. It was the key. If played here, it would open the doorway fully. Panicking, she smashed the tape against the floor. The whispers stopped, and the figures froze, but the screen glowed again, and her reflection grinned wider. "Breaking the key doesn't close the door," it said. "It only traps you inside." The room plunged into darkness as Emily's scream echoed. When Emily opened her eyes, she was no longer in the control room. She stood in a vast empty field under a blackened sky, the air thick with an unnatural silence. In the distance, she saw faint, shadowy figures, dozens of them watching her. Their forms were indistinct, shifting as if made of smoke, but their intent was clear. They were waiting. "Where am I?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. The figures did not respond, but the whispers began again, surrounding her, echoing from all directions. You opened the gate. Now you must broadcast. Ahead, a single television set sat on the ground, flickering with static. Emily approached cautiously, her heart pounding. On the screen she saw herself, but not as she was. The version of her on the screen was smiling that same unnerving grin, her eyes black and empty. The reflection spoke. You thought you could stop this, but you were always part of it. The broadcast continues, with or without you. Emily felt a crushing weight in her chest as the whispers grew louder, chanting her name. The figures moved closer, their smoky forms reaching for her. In a desperate attempt to escape, she turned and ran, but no matter how far she went, the field stretched endlessly. Then, the television screen flashed with a blinding light. Emily screamed as she felt herself being pulled back toward it, her body no longer under her control. The whispers reached a crescendo. It's time to begin. Suddenly, Emily's vision went black. When she awoke, she was back in her apartment, sitting in front of her computer. The screen displayed a live stream, her face staring back at her, smiling unnaturally. Thousands of viewers were watching, their comments pouring in. What is this? I can't stop watching. Is this real? The whispers returned, faint but ever present. Emily reached for the keyboard, but her hands wouldn't respond. Instead, she typed a single message into the chat. Welcome to the broadcast, you're next.